Hi everybody, welcome. My name is Tammy from Homesteading in the City with Tammy. If you are new here, I really appreciate you stopping by. If you've been here from the beginning, I really appreciate you coming by each week and watching the new videos that I put out. If you have not subscribed, please consider doing so. It does benefit me by you subscribing to my YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be doing another canning video. I am going to show you how to can green beans. If that is something that interests you, stick around. Okay, so for today's video, we're going to be canning green beans. So again, the supplies that you are going to need is going to be a big pot to boil some water, your pressure canner, some jars with lids and rings, and then of course, green beans. So let's get started. Okay, so I've got all my green beans and I've got them cut into small pieces. I raw pack my vegetables, so raw packing means that you can put your stuff, you can use your supplies room temperature. So I'm going to put it in here, but the canning book says to, once you put it in your jars, then they want you to add boiling water to the top of your jar. So I'm going to fill my jars right to this rim here, and this is the where you would screw the seal on, the ring onto. I'm going to put them to this below rim here, and I'll fill all my jars that way. I actually, on the stove, I have water getting ready to boil. I have it on, so hopefully it will start boiling here soon. And then I have my pressure canner with water in it to the line that it says, and I have that getting heated up. This does not necessarily have to come to a boil, but we do want it warm since we are putting hot or boiling water onto our green beans when we get them into the jar. So I am just going to take my green beans and put them in the jars, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so I just take my funnel and I just start putting them in, green beans into the jars, making sure that they are, and I shake them down a little bit so that they settle, and I can make sure that I can have green beans right to the top of that. And I have my double pressure canner ready to go so that I can, if I get more than my 8, which my canner will hold a round of 8, if I get more than my 8, I have my pressure canner that holds double stacks that I can add to that. So I don't know how many I'm going to actually have here. I've got extra jars in case I, had more than 7 or 8 for my canner. But green beans are one of those things, once they start coming in the garden, you get quite a few of them, and I think I usually can green beans once a week once they start coming into the garden. And if you're canning and you don't have enough of something, if your canner holds 8 jars and you only have enough to fill 4 jars or 5 jars, but you need to can it so you don't lose the produce that you have, you can always take your empty jars and add them to the canner filled with water. Don't put a lid on them because then you'll just seal water, but just add them, put water in them so that they're weighted down. That will allow all your jars to sit up in the canner when you're canning, and that way they won't tip over and possibly compromise the seal that you have. Last one here. Hopefully I have enough to fill that. Looks like I have enough. Well, I guess we're having green beans for dinner because that's enough for a meal. I don't think I can get them into these other jars. I can try getting them positioned down there. Okay. So now you just want to make sure that you rinse off your seals so that they don't have any residue of being stored on them, and that way they can go onto your jars. One of the things you can do also, and you don't have to, and I usually don't, when I can, I try not to put salt in my jars just to try to keep down on the amount of sodium that we intake. I used to think you had to put canning salt in with your jars for them to process correctly, and you do not. It's basically just a taste thing, so you no longer are required to put salt in your jars. If you are using salt, you do need to make sure that it is canning salt or non-iodized salt that you are putting into your jars. That way they will process okay if you are using salt. But then just get your seals and just make sure you rinse them really good so that they're ready to go on when your water is boiling. In the meantime, while you're waiting for your water to boil, make sure that you get your pressure canner ready so that you can easily just stick them once you put the hot water in them and you put the seal and the ring on there, that you can go ahead and put them in the pressure canner. With that water heating up, everything will be about the same temp. It won't be boiling, but it will be about the same temp that you have so that your jars will not crack, being that you have boiling water inside these, and then you're putting them into a batch of cold water. And then you can just get your pressure canner all ready and put the lid on it. The other thing that I do, I end up using a little measuring cup, like a 2-cup measuring cup, to take my water, my hot water from my pot and pour it into my jars. It just works easy for me to pour it in there, and I don't have to worry about it. And actually, I went a little bit lower on my beans because it's just me and my husband now, and we don't really eat a whole quart of green beans. So I was able to divide and get that 10th jar by taking a little bit out of all of these, but it still lets me put my water right up to the top, an inch from the top. It'll cover all of my green beans, and I don't have to worry about them being above the water or anything like that. So that's, but yeah, you put as much as you can in as you need, and I mean, if you were doing for a bigger family, then you would do quarts. But when it's just me and my husband, a pint is plenty. This is also a good time to take a look at your rings and make sure that they are not too rusty and that that they're still round and don't have any lifts or anything on them, so that it might compromise your sealing process. So those are one things. And once you see that, if you've got a lot of rust like that on there, then I would just throw them away so that you don't have them to reuse again and again, because that could compromise you being able to screw that down on there and keep the seal being allowing the seal to seal to the jar when it goes to the processing. So now that my water is boiling, I'm just going to take my measuring cup here and dip it into the boiling water and just pour it till it covers the top of my beans, which gives me about an inch headspace at the top of my jar. And I just go along and do that, and usually I end up filling them all with water first, and then I will go ahead and put the seals and the rings on them. It's not like a time test thing that you have to immediately do all of that. So you can take your time, make sure that you get them filled the way you want to, and go from there. Your water's boiling, so it's going to stay hot for quite a while. The other thing and I'll show you, the other thing that you need to do is also take a knife or some kind of a skewer or something and run it down the sides of your jars, and that allows you to get rid of any air bubbles that might be in your jars around the green beans. So I will show you what I mean by that. Okay, so now that I have all the water in there, I'm just going to run my knife down the side of that to allow any air pockets that are in there to come out. And you want to do this on each one, and then you're going to take your cloth and you're going to wipe the top of the jar just to make sure that there's no residue on the top of it, which will also compromise your seal. So you want to do that, and then you can put your seal and your ring on. So then you would just take and wipe your jar, making sure that, and at this point when you're wiping your jar, you are checking to make sure that there's not a chip out of this jar, you know, and it's good to run it around your hand. And then put your seal on, and then turn around and put your ring on. And again, making sure that they're only finger tight. You want to be able to easily back it off. That is exactly how tight you want. If it's too tight, it's a good possibility that they might seal, but the inside will blow way up, and it could compromise it that they won't seal. And then you can just stick it in your pressure canner, and then go on to the, oops, I'm not sure I made sure that this one was, and make sure you only have one lid there. And I'll keep going and do the rest of these and get them in the pressure canner, and I'll show you what it looks like. Now, what I meant before, if I didn't have enough jars to fill my canner, and if I only had this many jars, which is 7 jars, and I needed one more to fill my canner so that these won't tip over, because once they're in there in the pressure, they're going to start vibrating and they will move. It's a good possibility that since they're not tight right here, these ones are tight, but they're going to move. These could tip over, and it could compromise the seal, or it could allow all the liquid inside the jar to come out since it's just laying on its side. So what I've done before is I've taken an actual canning jar that has no lid on it, and I've just filled it with water and stuck it in the center of here, just so that it holds all of these together, which will allow you to be able to have them all stay standing while they're being pressure canned. I haven't had that problem when I put them on the top layer. I don't know why, but I've never had the problem when I've done 2 layers. So I've only had it happen in the bottom. So I've never put empty jars on the top when I've run it, because I'm going to have 2 jars on the top of my canner that is just going to sit there, but I'll put them in the middle, so hopefully they'll stay standing. If they don't, I'll show you what it looks like. Hopefully they don't tip over and they don't drain out. We'll see. But I've never had any issue with the top layer for some reason. I've only had the bottom, and I think it's just because it's sitting on the heat and they vibrate there that it makes them move around, where they're in the pressure up top, but they're not right on the heat. So we'll see. The other thing you want to make sure when you're putting your jars in the pressure canner and you are actually using the double stack, see how this one is shorter? You want to make sure you put this one on the top, because all of the jars on the bottom need to be the same size, since you're putting the rack inside the to hold them. So you need to make sure that the jars on the bottom are all the same size, that you don't have a bunch of little jars and one big one. So just making sure that they're the same size when you're double stacking them in your canner. The other thing I wanted to show, again, my trusty canning book that I use for everything. As you can see, it's got tags where it's labeled for everything that I've used. So this is a easy book that you can get at Walmart, usually in the canning section. They put a new one out every year. This is, I've had this for quite a few years. They have a new one with more recipes and different things, but this is my trusty canning book I go to for everything, to make sure that I am doing the processing correctly so that I'm preserving the food the correct way. So definitely, if you're going to be canning, you want to get these books so that you have the information at hand when you are processing and preserving your food. So correct myself, it is 20 minutes of processing time once I get 10 pounds of pressure. So once I have the steam coming out of my port, I'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll build steam and 20 minutes pressure time. And then once the pressure canner is done, all I'm going to do is allow it to, I'm going to turn the heat off and allow it to go down all on its own. Once it is completely depressurized and the pressure has gone down and the port in the back here has gone down so that I can, because this is my lid lock. Once this goes up, I'm not able to turn my lid anymore. So once that is up, that will keep me from turning my lid. So I can have zero pressure in here, but this lock could still be up. I have to wait for this lock to go down for me to open the lid. But I'll probably just let it go down, do its own thing, and an hour later I will bring them out of the canner. They'll probably most likely all be sealed at that point in time. I'll just let them go down. Since I don't need to do a second batch of green beans, I didn't have a full one here. If I would have had a full one where I needed to use it again, I would definitely, as soon as everything decompressed, I would pull them out and get them ready to go back in another round for the canner. But I don't have that worry, so I'll just let it decompress in there, and then I'll show you what my jars look like when I'm done. Okay, so this is the steam I'm talking about that I want coming out of my pressure canner. So now that I have that steam coming out of there, you want it to come out for at least a good minute straight like that, and it has been coming out for quite a while. So I'm going to put my weight on it, and it's going to start building pressure. And at that point, that's where this little tab is going to come up also. Once there gets enough pressure in there, this will come up, and then I'll start building pressure here on my gauge. Once I get it to 10 pounds of pressure, I will definitely turn down my canner. And like I said in the last video, I know that I can turn this down. My burner I can turn down to like 4, and it'll keep me at 10 pounds of pressure for my 20 minutes that I need it at 10 pounds of pressure. But again, you can always hear when it is going a little bit higher, as you can hear the steam coming out of that, and it's getting ready to pop that up to seal that for me. See, and that just came up and it sealed that. So now that that's sealed, it will start building pressure here in my gauge. This is where you definitely do not want to walk away from your pressure canner. You want to be able to be here so when it hits 10 pounds of pressure, you can reduce the heat so that you can keep it at 10 pounds of pressure and make sure your timer goes on at the same time. Basically turn the timer on before you turn the heat down, and then watch it for a little bit so that it doesn't, you didn't turn the heat down too low and then it goes down below 10 pounds of pressure. You want to keep it right at 10, and you've got the 2 lines right there by 10. That's where you want to keep it. You don't want to keep it much higher than that so that it keeps a good amount of pressure. Lower is a chance that you're not going to have them be preserved properly, and they could go bad on you. So 10 pounds of pressure is definitely what you want to keep it at. Okay, so we are now at 10 pounds of pressure, so you just want to make sure you put your timer on for the desired amount of time that you need to pressure to process for, and then turn your heat down on your stove so that you can keep it at 10 pounds of pressure. So when you open your pressure canner after it has already gone down and you're able to open it, you just want to let it steam a little bit so that you're not taking the stuff inside there right out and sticking them on the counter, because the temperature change could, if it's still quite warm in there and it's cool in your house, you could have the jars crack. So you definitely don't want to do that, and it'll also it can also allow the liquid inside the jars to bubble up and come out and compromise the seals. So you want to just make sure once you open it, you let it sit a little bit before you take the lid off, and then let them sit in there with the lid off for a few minutes before you take them out and stick them on your table. Well, those two didn't tip over, so I didn't have any issues with that. So there's the jars all out of the pressure canner, just waiting for them to seal. It could take a little bit of time for them to actually seal up. You want to wait till they're completely cool before you put them, label them, and put them in your storage. They shouldn't be warm when you do that. So usually the next day is when I do that. Well, everybody, that was it for today's video. I hope you learned something and will able to take this information and can your own green beans in the future. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to it. Hit the thumbs up and the notifications. And as always, I will see you on the next one. Have a good day. Bye.